I had what I think is a pretty cool idea this morning around translating applications. I've actually been listening to the Y Combinator lecture series. There's this really cool lecture series from Y Combinator that talks about starting a startup. And what I want to build, what I want to create isn't really a startup in that it's not, creating a big idea. What I want to do is create a really good foundation so I can make lots of ideas really quickly. So my plan for next year is to basically build a ton of SaaS applications and release them and be able to do this really quickly and see if I can create something that's super valuable, um, super fast. And one of the ways I'm doing that is by simply tackling problems properly from the beginning. And this means the first time I tackle that problem, it takes a lot longer. But the next time I tackle it, everything goes faster. And that's why I built View Model, because I'm constantly rebuilding these sort of backends. Whereas I decided, all right, I'm going to take the time to build this properly. And now whenever we tackle that problem again, it's solved really, really, really well. And it's super easy to use with a whole bunch of other components. So one of the other problems, which I realized we're going to start having, is managing, being able to do bookings. So a lot of the industries I want to go into do bookings. Like I just went and got my eyes tested recently, and I went online, and it was a really nice booking experience. They nailed it. Everything was super easy. I just put in my name. I think I just put in like my email and picked a time that I wanted to go in. Before that, I picked a store, and it had a nice map where I could easily find the store that I wanted to choose, and then I could do a booking. And what I was thinking is there's like 3 apps I'm thinking of building soon that all require some sort of a booking mechanism. And if I can put that behind an interface, so a managed booking interface, which is easy to do now because I've got View Model. So this can be like an interface that uses View Model behind the scenes. Then we can create a really nice booking system that's going to work with any backend. There'd have to be some assumptions. So for example, maybe you have to name some of the fields, or at least for the first iteration, you would have to name some of the fields the way we want them to be named. And then later on, maybe you could abstract that out. But the idea is that you can tackle a lot of these problems properly, and then they're much easier to solve in the future. And my problem with a lot of the coding communities I've been a part of, or not communities, but like people that I've coded with, is and this is just a personal problem. I actually don't think it is a problem. It's more of a me thing because I think I'm a bit obsessive compulsive about this stuff. And I have a vision for building lots of apps, not for just building like one app well. I want to build lots of apps really quickly well. And I think the way you do that is by adding more abstractions than what we get from frameworks like Vue or Quasar and Laravel. So these frameworks are fantastic and they make things so much faster, but I just think we can do a shit ton better. So for example, another one that I want to do is basically storing data, being able to store data on the user's computer, like images and files and stuff like that. So that could be one interface. Another interface could be storing on an AWS. Another interface implementation, sorry, not another interface, another implementation for that could be, I don't know, some Laravel. And, the Laravel framework does this. It's got a way of abstracting out storing data, but we don't have a way of doing this tightly coupled to Vue. So that's what I want to do. I want to start creating more of these interfaces coupled to Vue, which brings me to this video, which was an idea I had this morning around translation and text. And if we make a lot of assumptions about how we build apps, I think that we can do some really cool stuff around this. So I want to share with you my idea. Let me just jump into the index page, which is basically if every single bit of text on our app were wrapped inside of a component. So if we had like a text component, and part of that is you could choose like the tags. So it could be a H1, a H2, a P tag, or a div, or whatever. And if every single one of those text components had to have an ID for the translation, we can do some really magical things. Things like, well, we could actually swap out the component for showing that text and make it so that if you're a translator, maybe you like toggle something, and I'm going to build this in a second just to test out the theory. You could have a toggle so that the translator could just, maybe right click on the text and say edit, or even like double click on the text, or we could come up with some strategy around that. Edit that text in their language of choice. So maybe it's like, Italian, for example. They put in the Italian transaction, that hits a backend that then matches that translation to the ID of that text. And then you can easily create a JSON file, which is your translation, like your I18N translation file out of those translations that you have on the backend. So I thought this was a really cool idea, and let's go ahead and test it out. All right, so I'm going to create a component for this. Let's create so we'll say Hygen component new, and I'll make this a base component. And eventually this will end up in its own package. And we'll call this just a B text component, I think is a pretty cool name for that. Cool name. I don't know if I'd call it cool, but... So this is B is what I use for my base components. So B standing for base, and then text. And you can do some cool stuff like if you wanted to do auto imports, you can now do that because you've got a prefix for your base components. I'm not sure I would do that, but just thought I'd drop that idea. So let's uncomment these and think about some of the stuff that we're going to have. So I want to be able to have a translation ID. Translation ID, that's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll deal with that for now. Or maybe we can call this like UID, unique ID. No, translation ID will do. And then we can have the text that actually gets put into here, but we also want a tag as well. So how about we come in here and call that a component so it can be dynamic. And then we'll say is equal to whatever the tag is that we choose. So we can come in here and say tag is equal to a string. We'll make that optional, and then we'll give that a default. With defaults, and we'll just whack that in there. And then how about we say that the tag is equal to maybe a p tag by default? So yeah, if you just do normal text, it's a p tag. Okay, let's go with that. And instead of putting that in a h1, that's just what my default component thingy did for me. Yeah, we can now whack that in as a b text. Now, one thing I'm thinking now is we might have a problem with color. So if you want to do something with different colors in here, that could be a problem. Unless you do like a v-html here, which actually I don't think is dangerous because this is going to be using HTML that we're storing inside of the application. So it's not going to be user data. So I think it is actually safe at this point to do something like that. So let's go v-html there and then put the text in. So we'll have another one, which is the text. We'll set that equal to a string. And just in case people want to sort of create that to begin with nothing, maybe we make that optional. No, we'll just make it required. I don't want to screw around with optional tags for something like that. And then we can just throw that directly in there. And this is going to complain. I expected this. So let's jump into ESLint. Actually, where was that error? I think it's, yeah, so we're getting 2 linting errors here that we basically need to ignore. And I'm thinking about ignoring these permanently because the people on my team are smart enough to know that you really want to be careful with v-html. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's worth hiding this by default or not. So I won't put that in the template yet. Okay, there we go. So that's gotten rid of that error. And now the next thing that I want to do is that this component will eventually be swappable, I'm thinking. So we can swap out B text so that we got B translation text and then like a B base text. And then what we could do is say if you're logged in as a translator, we use a translation text, which is going to have a little bit more overhead, not much more overhead, but a little bit more overhead. And then if you're not a translator, it basically doesn't bring in that component that has more overhead because it's got those translating capabilities. So now I'm going to whack inside of there. I think this will work. Or maybe we'll have to wrap this in a template to... how am I going to do this? Maybe we do like a Q dash pop-up. What is Quasar's component for that? We have a pop-up component. Q pop-up edit. Yeah, you could use a pop-up edit, but I'm thinking more... Actually, maybe a menu component. I think a menu component might make more sense here. Let's say Q menu. Why isn't that completing for me? No, it doesn't matter. Q menu. And I wonder if we'll run into problems if this is multi-tags inside of the template. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's go ahead and save that. And we can now make that a self-closing tag. And then we can say like edit here just to sort of get something that we can view. Because I've written a lot of code without anything to view yet. So maybe we can actually use this text. You can build anything. And we'll wrap that inside of a B text component. See if I can get that imported, and I have to restart Voila. Whenever I create things with Hygen, so whenever things are automatically generated with like a CLI tool, Voila doesn't pick up on it, so I have to restart it again. Not a big deal, but you know, it's just something that is good to know. And now we need a translation ID. So maybe we call that something like welcome message. And we don't need the colons there, sorry. So that would be something like welcome message, and this is what would end up in our JSON, and then that would be equal to whatever the text is. So let's set the text equal to welcome, well, maybe something like, yeah, there we go. You can build anything. Can build anything. And I'm just going to do a bunch of undos just to grab the styling from what we had before, because I want to see if I can basically mimic exactly what we had here. There we go. So let's bring all that back. And now we can come in here, paste the classes in there and the styling. And yeah, we would basically just whack that text directly in there. So let's just see how that works out. So we get you can build anything. It looks like it's using the wrong tag. So we'll have to say the tag is equal to a H1. So now we get the H1. It looks like it's not picking up the classes, which makes sense because it doesn't know which component to put it on. So let's see if putting the Q menu inside of here works, or if that clashes with the VHTML. I actually don't know. Yes, you can't have VHTML and then have the thing inside of there. So maybe we can do that. And you can do like the triple mustaches thing. I actually haven't done this in so long, I can't remember what it is. There's a way you can do like a template that works with HTML as well. But you know what? Let's make that a future Luke problem. I think that's fine for now. But there we go. We got you can build anything. And when I click on that, we get this edit here menu popping up. So now what we could do is we could have a Q menu component inside of there. And then what this would do is hit our backend. So maybe I could actually bring in view model now to mimic what this would look like. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So before I bring in view, no, I'll just bring in view model first. So view model, where's my docs on that? Here we go. So we can just kind of mimic storing this on a backend. I'm going to copy that PMPM text. And also I want to keep using this just to catch all the bugs and stuff that I might run into. And then when that's installed, we want to have a module. So we'll say Hygen module new. And for now, I'm just going to call it translation. I'm sure I can think of something better, but translation will do for now. Translation, yep. And now if we jump into our translation module, why isn't that coming up? That's what we called it, isn't it? Translation. Yeah, okay, I just needed a second. And the next thing I want to do is set this up correctly. So this will be the text. And then eventually maybe you would have like language in there as well. And we want to have a unique ID. So yeah, I think I would want both a unique ID. And then you would also have the ID, which is a translation ID. That's what we called it, translation ID. Something like that. Definitely not modeling this perfectly, but this would be totally fine. So all of those things are required. And then what I would probably actually do is have sort of a parent and then a translation text. So have like a translation, and then under that you would have a translation text and create it that way. But I think this is fine for now for this demonstration. And I'm still sort of thinking this through. Okay, so now we got the translation and we installed all of the dependencies for view models. So let's come in here. I've got an example here of how you would use this with a Quasar boot file. So I can copy that. And now we can say Quasar new boot. Is that what it is? I thought that's what it was. Quasar new, did I spell that wrong? Quasar new boot. Okay, that's kind of weird. Quasar. Yeah, it even says here in the examples, Quasar new And then one of them is boot. Quasar new boot. Okay, you need to do the boot name straight after, I think. I'm used to having menus that pop up. View dash model. All right, there we go. So now let's jump into view dash model, whack that in there. The next thing we need to do is jump into quasar.config.js and then add view model in there so that boot file is actually used. And check that we got no errors in the console. And we don't. All right, there we go. So now we should be able to use this. So. We can click on there and get the menu coming up. Now we want to have a creator for the translation. So I'll say const translation creator is equal to use creator, and we'll pass the translation through there so that we can create this translation. I don't know why I'm getting a type error there. It's probably something that I've done wrong in the package. That's all right. Let's just leave it for now. And the next thing we want to do is make it so that you can essentially type the text inside of there, and then it will automatically translate that. Or maybe we have a translate button. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay, so let's do this. Let's say class is equal to Q padding all medium, just to basically pad that out a little bit. And then we'll have an input there. And, oh man, this is going to really bug me. Maybe it's because the version of Pina that I'm using is an older one. That's all right. Greetings, Luke. Make more short 10-minute videos, please. Well, they might be coming soon, but I'm kind of in streaming mode at the moment while I figure out some of the packages that I'm building. And the idea is once a lot of these foundations are in place, I'll be able to build more videos where we actually build stuff, which would be super cool. I do have a tendency to do longer videos, don't I? I think that's good advice. So let's go view model, core, node modules. Okay, so that should be using the version of Pina ORM. Am I pulling use creator from the right spot? Yeah, let's try restarting Volar. So that means that the Pina ORM that's using should be the same Pina ORM that use creator is using. So I really don't understand why. Oh, here we go. We can see now. Pina ORM 1. Okay, so it's installed Pina ORM 1.7.0. Maybe that's got something to do with it. All right, this is definitely something that Luke's going to have to look into later. Let's try bringing in 0.2 and see what happens there. And maybe I'm not supporting a low enough version. Yeah, so the problem I'm running into here is I think there's two versions of Pina ORM being installed. And I think it's because I was saying it has to be at least 0.2, whereas the one that was installed was 0.0. So if I reinstall my dependencies from scratch, maybe that would have solved the problem. But let's just try changing that version. Okay, it seems to be satisfied now. Cool. All right, that's something I can fix later. Let's push on. So for the translation creator, we can come in here and say the model translation creator. That gives us a form for free. And then we can have the translation ID being modeled there. And let's make this a text area. So we'll say type is equal to text area. See what that looks like. Yep, and then let's make it filled just because I think that looks better. Don't need that edit here button anymore. And maybe a button under that where you can then submit it. Submit the translation. Mabel is equal to submit. Make it look sexy. And I might actually wrap this in a div with Q padding or medium so that the padding actually ends up on that div. And then we just get this nice effect where this is padded and then the button kind of takes the full width there. So we can say class is equal to full width. Yeah, I just think that looks a little bit nicer. And now we can say, maybe we could put these side by side actually. That could look good. Yeah, how about this? We assume that they're on a larger screen and we'll say, what's this? That's funny. I was just watching one of your older videos and now falling into this live stream. Oh, awesome. Oh, that's so cool to know that like somebody was watching my videos and saw that this stream was happening. Wow. Isn't it a cool world we live in now? And we could say, well, in some ways, width is equal, or maybe like a min width on that, and set that equal to like 800 pixels. So I'm just going to assume that the person is on a larger screen, and just for the sake of building this. And now maybe we could split it. So we could have like a div here, which is the current text for that. And if we turn this into a row, and then we just put like a col on both of these, and I'm not going to put col directly on a Q import. I'd rather wrap that. So we'll say is equal to col, and we'll do -6 on both of these. So that kind of just puts them side by side. And then I also want a little bit of space in between these two because that text I'm pretty sure is going to like end up smacking up against this. So I think you've got like a Q, col gutter, which we can add in there. All right, let me just create an example so we can work with this a little bit better. You can build anything, blah, 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 blah. Save that. Yeah, there we go. They're not hitting up against each other. My phone just went off telling me I have a call now, but I know that I don't. Yeah, there we go. So that's working nicely. Cool. Actually, I think another thing that we can do is say col gutter X. So let's go col gutter X because I think it's adding padding around the outsides, which I don't want. Okay, that seems to have done nothing. All right, that'll do. It's working. So now we can come in here and say, translate, you can build anything, blah, 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 blah. So then they say this is, you know, the translation. And when they click on submit, then that will create a translation on the back end and then close out that dialog. Okay, so let's go with that. See, isn't this, I just think view model is so cool that I can now pretend that I'm using a backend and when I'm ready, actually swap it out for a real backend. Oh, wicked. So now we can come in here and say const show, we'll call this a translate menu. Translate menus equal to a ref that is false by default. And then we can model the menu on that. Okay, so that still works. And I'm just do like a set timeout just to quickly check that that is working of like 2000 and equal false. Save it, refresh the page. That shows. Okay, so that does work. Cool. I can just set this to false now when I want to close that dialog. So on our creator, we can just say on success, we say show translate menu dot value is equal to false. You can't return an assignment, I'm pretty sure, so I have to wrap that in parentheses, or at least you're not supposed to. And then let's get the translation creator to put a spinner on, not the import, on the button. So we'll say loading is equal to translation creator dot creating dot value. Save that. I'm starting a new Quasar project as a front end to a fast API backend in a Docker environment. Examples for this is scarce, however, may be an opportunity for a video for you. I've never used fast API. Maybe it's something that I could look at. The only thing that would intrigue me about doing fast API is if they've got a standardized way of doing building a RESTful API, which I don't think fast API does, which is totally fine. it's just not really the area that I'm looking at right now. Maybe an example project, but yeah, I'd need to learn more about how Fast API does things like authentication. Um, yeah, before diving into something like that. So maybe you can sort of enlighten me a little bit more on that in the chat. Okay, so we've now got the creator, which is going to spin. We need to make it so that when you click on this button, it actually creates it. So now we can say translation creator dot create, and it's as simple as that because the form is being modeled here on the translation creator. Then it'll make that with that translation ID. Now, there's another cool thing we got with use creator where we can basically say merge fields here. I'm more interested in a Docker setup for Quasar. Yeah, if you look at anything related to a Docker setup for something like Vite, it would probably be pretty translatable to Quasar. So if you can do like a Vite Vue project and get that Dockerized, there's going to be very, very close similarities because at the end of the day, when you run a build on your project, let me just comment this out so it'll build. I assume it'll build. So if I build this, I thought I had a build script by default on this. Okay, maybe I don't have one. All right, so let's just say p quasar build. P is short for pnpm. That's just how I've aliased it. At the end of the day, you just end up with a dist directory. So in terms of Dockerizing it, I think all you really need to do is make it so that this dist directory ends up serving the contents. So in this case, dist SPA, because we just exported it as an SPA, because that's what the default is, and you just want to serve this folder inside of here. So it's basically like any static application. Basically, it doesn't even need to be Vue. Any static site that's Dockerized, it depends how far you want to go with the Dockerizing. You probably also want to build it as well. So you probably want like a Docker image that builds it. But yeah, all you really need is like an Ubuntu image. You would install, in my case, I would use PNPM. Or you could use, Yarn or NPM, depending on what you're setting up. So I think you'd need to get that installed and then just basically just run the build command. So you don't need Quasar installed globally. What Quasar does when you run Quasar like this is it actually dives into, I'm pretty sure it dives into your node modules and finds Quasar that way. So it jumps into bin and then finds Quasar in here and runs that version of Quasar. So what you can actually do to run Quasar is say pnpm, or if you're using Yarn, you would say Yarn, or if you're using npm, you'd say npm run. So you can just say pnpm run, is the verbose version, Quasar. Okay, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just pnpm Quasar. Yeah, so when I run pnpm Quasar, that runs my local version of Quasar. So when you're doing the Docker version of this, you would just say something like pnpm Quasar build. And then you don't need Quasar installed globally. It basically uses the internal version of Quasar inside of node modules and then runs a build script. And then you end up with this dist directory. And all you need to do then is serve what's inside of this dist directory. Okay, I just got super distracted. Sorry, guys. Okay, heading back to what we were doing. I want to come up here and say, get our props here. Const props is equal to that. We got our translation ID here. So what we can do now is say, hey, I want you to merge this into the form when you're creating it. So every time you create something, merge whatever's inside of here into the form. And we can send through the translation ID, which is just props.translation ID. There we go. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You would also want the language set as well. So that's something that you would probably want to set globally. So maybe we set that using local storage. So then we can use Vue use as local storage for that. Let's see if I've got Vue use in the template. Yeah, we've already got Vue use in the modular Quasar template. So, okay, like give me a second to think about this. If we go to the, no, not the index page. Let's go higher up than that. Let's go into the main layout. So we'll go main layout. And inside of the main header, let's add another button here, which you would probably hide for the average user, but make it available to whoever the translator is. But we're just testing things for now. And we could add a Q- button, or maybe like a Q input, which is the language that you're translating to. And we actually, a QSelect, that makes a lot more sense. All right. And then we can view model the language. And then to make this globally available, let's go Control-Alt-M here and create where would I do this? Yeah, okay, we do this in shared. And let's create a new folder here called composables. And now I'll create a new file in there. So instead of using Pina, I like to use create global state because it feels a little bit more direct to me. This is something that we get from VueUse. It's a way that you can create global state. And we can say use language or translator maybe. Translator. Let's go with that. And I can say export const use translator is equal to use create global state. Now that's not going to import by default yet because you need to import something at least once before Volar picks up on it. And I think we can just go use create global state, and that's coming out of @VueUse/core. Or maybe it's just create global state. Yeah, all right, there it is. So now we got create global state. We pass through, I believe, a function there. And then that returns the language. And what we can do is say that the language is equal to use local storage so that this actually gets synced with our local storage. And we can give it a key for that. So we can say translator's language. And I think you have to give it a default value as well. Yeah, an initial value. So let's just say, I don't know, any languages. Hang on. So JavaScript language list. I can't remember how these... Here we go. So somebody's already done this. You would want to find one that actually matches these up to the language as well, but that'll do for now. It's something that I can work with. So we can say, let's do this as well. Const available languages, but I'm going to run out of space if I do that. So let's do this. We'll create a folder called use translator inside of there. I'm just going to save this quickly, whack that in there. So now I can say languages.ts and say export const languages here. So we have a list of all of the languages that we can just paste in there so that it doesn't muddy this file. And now I can report that, return that here, languages. So we just need to get that imported. There we go. That's imported. And by default, I don't know, like maybe I don't know any other languages and I don't want to offend anybody here with by typing in something that's just gobbledygook and then being upset because it's their language. See, I don't even know what AF stands for. All right, let's just go for EN for English. That's fine. And we'll set that to that by default. And we might even be able to add some typing here. Let me just quickly see if I can lay that out a bit differently. Can I just say key of type of languages? Oh no, because this is probably just key of. Well, if that's an array, why wouldn't that work? Key of or maybe like in languages. Fuck, I can't remember how to do this. Geez, that's embarrassing. No, it's not. We all forget this shit. Let's be real. Key of type of. Yeah, okay. Doesn't matter. I don't need to type this. Just got a little bit attached there. Okay, so now we've got the language. That gets put into local storage because we're using use local storage, but it's just a ref. So this is really cool. What this is a ref that automatically adds that into local storage for us. It's kind of like magic. And then we return here all the languages so we can easily create a select menu for that. And then we've got the actual selected language there. And since it's synced with local storage, when they refresh the page, it's still going to stick around. So now we can come in here and in the main header and say const language, I'll call this service is equal to use, we'll call this translation service. Translation service is equal to use translation. Oh, hang on, use translation also happens to be a view use core thing, so I imported the wrong thing there. Oh, use translator is what I called it. Come on. To restart Volar. Otherwise, we'll have to do this manually. There we go. We got there eventually. I thought I had an alias for shared. In fact, I'm sure I do. All right, screw it. That's good enough. Okay, so now we can say for the V model, translation service language.value. So that's being selected there. And we can say here that is the language. Maybe capitalize that L. I'm going to make it filled and dense so it doesn't take up too much space. And inside of our app, we now got that drop down where you can select the language, but we need the options. So we can set that equal to translation service dot languages. And I don't have to say dot value because that's just the raw value for that. Let's give that a refresh and see if it works. And that works. And we can say style is equal to, we'll set a set width for that of maybe like 80 pixels. Should probably do it. Nope, need a little more. Let's go 120 and maybe give it a background color equal to white so it stands out better. Yeah, and remember this would only show up if you're a translator. So now the translator can come in here. They can choose the language from that list there. And then what we do is inside of our B text, we can make it so that when this is created, it's created for that specific language. So we merge in here the translation ID. We also import use translator. And then I'll say here, const translator is equal to use translator. By the way, I just want to quickly point out what I did here with use translator. We use create global state. And basically, this is like a composable where every single time you use it, you're getting the same version of language. So when I call create global state a second time, I'm not getting a new instance of language. It actually returns that original composable. So that's why this is a global state. It returns the original composable that was created the first time, which is really, really, really helpful if you want to work with global state. And it's basically like the composition API, but it's global, like magic. So now we can come in here and say, that's the translation ID, and we need the language as well. So let's jump into translation, and we'll add in here the language. And that now gets typed there. And we can say translator.language.value. So we'll save that. So what happens now is we make a creator, something for creating a translation. When it's successful, we hide the menu. By the way, whenever you create this, I want you to merge this data into there. So I want you to merge in the translation ID, which comes from our props. And I want you to merge in the language, which is coming from that global language, which has been set up here. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, inside of submit, now when we call create, what it does is it takes the stuff that's on the form. So the translation creator comes with a form for free that we can work with. So now the ID of the wait, that's wrong. Is that meant to be ID? No, that's meant to be the text. Haha. So now the text is inside of the form. So we end up with the text when we call create here. It merges this form here with the stuff inside of merge. So this is really cool because it makes it very easy to say up front, hey, this is data that I want inserted, what I want inserted in with the record. So I've got the form, but there's other data that I don't want to be a part of the form and I don't want to have to manually set it. So this is just a really nice place where you can say, hey, merge this in when you're ready to create that. And then when it's created, it sets this to false, so the menu hides, blah, 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 blah. Let's just refresh the page here and see if we can get this to work. You truly can build anything in the language of UZ, CLI, whatever the hell that is. So submit, that was submitted. And that means if I go Control-Shift-I here, jump into application and jump into IndexedDB where we've got basically our fake database. Oh, I've got some stuff from when I was using localhost 9000 before, but this is the one we're interested in here, translations.records. There's our record that got created. So now, for the translation ID of welcome message, the text is equal to that, and that's the language that we've done it for. So what you could then do is get all of your translation records. So this would end up on a database, and I'd be using like an SQL database. And then you could have some sort of a script that just goes through everything that is for that language, and then it automatically generates your I18N JSON object. So you know how with I18N, you just basically have a JSON object for all of your translations. Now this can essentially make that JSON object for you. So then you could easily create like a build command that just fetches the translations from the back end. You can make them public because who gives a shit if other people can see them. It just fetches them from the back end and then turns that into a JSON object. In fact, you could even do the entire turning of it into a JSON object on the back end as well. And then what that would do is create, for example, a languages. I can't remember how this is done, but that would be a script that automatically creates this languages directory. And then inside of there, you might have another folder called like uz-cyrl-uz. And then inside of there, you would get like the language file or whatever that ends up looking like. And that's it. You've now got an interface where every time you create text, instead of doing it the normal way, you do it in a way where a translator can click on it. Okay, so that's the other thing. We need to make it so that you can toggle whether or not you're a translator. And of course, when the person logs in, that would actually decide whether or not they're able to do this. So imagine that somebody's logged in. We've done some sort of a check to check if they are a translator. And then we've gone, maybe you've got a permissions object that has a role equal to translator. We go, all right, you've got a role equal to translator. Therefore, we're going to show this QSelect menu. And we also want to have a translating mode. So maybe like a Q toggle, and we'll V model on that. And we'll have a translation service dot translating dot value. Okay, so we haven't got that yet. And we'll maybe say translation mode. I don't know. That'll do for now. Now for translation service, let's jump into that. And we can come in here and say, I'm just going to steal that text. Translation, translating is equal to translating. And the way I usually name these is use translator dot and then whatever the name of the variable is, because that means you'll never end up with a clash. So use translator dot translating. That's just what it ends up getting called in local storage. So now we can return this here. By the way, we tell it that it's a Boolean by setting it to, let's say, false by default. All right, so let's come back here, refresh the page. Why am I not getting that toggle? Where did we put it? We put it in the main header, didn't we? Oh, you Qtoggle. Oh, and then I forgot the second G now. There we go. It turns green when it's right, so that's good to know. So now it's translating mode or not translating mode. Let's change the color of that to secondary. Well, it's kind of doesn't really work, does it? Maybe just make it green. It's going to look fugly, but that'll do. Oh, no, that's so bad. Maybe like a bright pink, like pink-2. Maybe that'll work. Yeah, but make it a little bit brighter. Let me just throw this over here. It'll be easy to work with. Yeah, okay, I don't mind that. That'll do. Oh, but now you can't tell that it's turned on. Ah! All right. Maybe like a dark pink? What works well with pink? I'm just so bad with colors. You can't do gray because it kind of looks like it's turned off, or maybe you could. Whatever, that'll do. Okay, so now we need to check if that's on to know whether or not we show the QSelect. Maybe we'll actually put that there. And we can add a if here if we are in translating mode. And let's just add a Q margin right of small to that. Okay, it looks weird on that side for some reason. Let's put it back over here. Doesn't matter. This is just me prototyping. I really shouldn't be getting obsessed over this stuff. Okay, so we're in translation mode. Then you can set the language. If I refresh the page, both of those things stick. So if I untoggle that and refresh the page, that sticks as well because we're using that mad use local storage thing. So whoever's translating don't have to always change this when they refresh the page. So the next thing is when you click on that, this opens up. So what I want to do here, I'm not going to do it right now, but maybe I will do it right now. Yeah, okay, let's just do a dummy version right now. So we'll say Quasar new boot translation component is what I'll call this. Not the best naming, but it's okay. We'll come into our boot and we'll call this translation component. And inside of translation component, we now want it to basically choose the component based on whether or not the person is a translator. I'll experiment with this later. I need to sign off now. Oh, okay. My boss wants me awake tomorrow. I live in the Netherlands, so it's about midnight. We'll restart this. Not so live stream tomorrow. Yeah, cool. Man, somebody from the Netherlands. By the way, if anybody's watching, let me know where you're from. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll accept app from here, and we're going to change the component based on whether or not the person is a translator. Now, I don't think this is really going to work unless it automatically refreshes the page. So what I might do quickly, while I think of it, is make it so that when this is updated at update model value, I want to refresh the page. So let's just have a function for that. Function refresh page. And I think it's like window dot. Bugger, I can't remember. Window dot, maybe like navigator or something, dot refresh. All right. JavaScript, refresh, page, window dot something, location, duh. Okay, that makes sense. Location dot reload or refresh? Reload. Okay, so now what we can do is come down here and say, when that toggle changes, it refreshes the page. So basically it'll pull in the right component. Watching from Belgium, that's just beside the Netherlands. Wow, so maybe this is the right time for, is that the other side of the world? Wow, my geography is horrendous. Just trying to picture it in my head. Yeah, it kind of is the other side of the world from Australia. So let's see if this works. If I toggle that now, it does refresh the page. Yeah, when it does it. Okay, that's good. So next up, we want to make sure that this bText component is basically dynamic. So here we go. This is going to be cool. We're going to do some fancy shiz, guys. You're going to love it. We're going to have two versions of the bText component. One of them that is basic for the end user and one of them that is for the translator, so that the end user doesn't get the overhead of the other component. So let's say Hygiene component new. This is going to be a base component, and we'll call this bTranslator text. Did that work? Maybe I just need to refresh this. Oh yeah, it worked. Just needed to press refresh. So now I'm going to grab everything inside of here and paste it into this bTranslator text one, because this is all our translator version. And then I'm going to jump into bText and essentially cull all of the translating stuff now. So we won't have a Q menu anymore. We'll just have the text going through. None of this translation related stuff. And then we actually need one more component, which is kind of the entry point for this. Oh, do we? Or do we just swap it out at a higher level? Okay, no, ignore that line of thought. The perfect time for development. It's 15 minutes past midnight now. Oh my gosh. That's the perfect time for development? You crazy. I guess it is if you stay up late enough and you get kind of that second win. All right, so let's knock out some of these. Will we need the tag as well? Props to... Oh, we just don't need the props part of that. So now this is a really simple version of that component. This is what the end user will get rather than the translator. And then this is what the translator will get. And then what we can do is have a B text component inside of that boot file that we essentially set up from the beginning. So we say app.component and we call it B text. So I'm actually going to rename this because I'm worried that it's going to automatically try and import this one. So let's just call this B standard text. Yeah, that'll do. We'll rename that one as well. And that's all I should have to do. I won't do it in the texts for now because I'm not even going to fill those out. App.component. The name of the component is btext regardless. And the component that we get depends on what it is in, if the user is a translator or not. So now what we should be able to do is say const user is or maybe just like is translating is equal to use, not use local storage because we can't use it at the moment because we're not in the composition API, or I think we actually might be at this point. That's right, we can use local storage directly. Dot get item, and then the name of that item in local storage. So I believe it's called use translator dot translating. So is translating is equal to whatever that item is. And then the btext component is set based on what that is. So now we can say const component, oh gosh, learn to type, Luke, is equal to, if they are translating, then it's going to be the B translator text. Otherwise, it's just going to be the B standard text. Oh, come on. Auto import for me. And then that's the component that we actually pass through. So whenever we use btext, it picks the right component. And now I can go into the index page where we can test this. So we've got btext there. We don't want to import it anymore. That actually won't work because that component doesn't exist. But this is now being imported at a higher level. So now that shows up, I'm in translation mode. So I can click on this and I can translate it. If I untick that, okay, it's still in translation mode. So let's have a look at why that might be happening. Let's just try another refresh just in case it kind of fell behind. No. So we go to, oh, you know what? It wouldn't be being converted to a Boolean. So we'd be getting a string. So we need to make sure it gets converted to a Boolean. And we can do that by going here, and let's just console.log so we can see what we're working with for is translating. We'll go full screen there. So we're getting the string false. Yeah, you can tell by the way that's written. So if I write false in here, notice that it comes out in this color. That's how you know if it's the string false versus false, as in the Boolean. So now I think a way that we can handle this is by essentially wrapping this in Boolean. There's a few ways you can do it, but I think this might be the most sensible way to go about it. Let's do another console.log now. So it comes back as true. Yeah, okay, wrapping it in a Boolean probably doesn't work. So what we can do is we can say is translating string. Just going to figure out a way for now. And then we can say, actually, I think you can JSON.stringify this. Wow, another person from the Netherlands. This is crazy. So it's everybody kind of in that area. Let's do, I just want to test something here. I think you can say is translating, because I'm pretty sure this is what view use does behind the scenes. JSON dot pass, whatever we get there. And let's console.log that. And I could just do an equals to, okay, false, true. Cool. Okay, so you can do it with a JSON.pass. And now, if I click on that, it shows up. But if we're not in translating mode, it doesn't show up. So basically, this is going to be a lot faster because it doesn't have to create a queue menu component and all of that. So you're essentially not sacrificing an optimized website. And I think the way I'd actually want to do this is if you're doing the B translator text, you would then use a dynamic component. All right, so let's say const B translator text is equal to, I just want to, yeah, we probably want to code split this. So we'd actually grab that and put it here. And I think that's it. And then we get to take advantage of code splitting, whereas, which I think means that that component wouldn't be pulled in until it actually gets used. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. In fact, I think I can check it in here. B, here we go. So we got B translator text is being imported. This might not be a great way to test it actually, because this might be a Vite thing. Yeah, so that's being imported every time. And even when we're not using it, it's still, but is it importing the whole thing or is it importing a reference to it? No, so that's, let's just refresh again. So I'm not in translating mode, but it's still importing the entire thing. Oh, this has to be a function. I'm pretty sure. Let's try again. Here we go. I refresh the page and it's not importing B translator text every time I refresh it. And now we enable that. Refreshes the page and it imports it this time. How effing cool is that? So, oh, okay, but now it doesn't work. Really cool, Luke. But I think we might be able to do like some sort of an await on this. Like, oh man, I can't remember how all this stuff works anymore. Maybe something like that. Just have no idea what I'm doing at this point. This is one of those things where you learn it and then you kind of forget it again, because I don't do a lot of this kind of dynamic async stuff. I went deep on it once, but I've pretty much lost it now. I think you have to do that and then say like .default. Yeah, I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but it definitely works. How do I clear these requests? Where's my clear? Too many requests on the dance floor. Nope, not seeing any options there. No, that doesn't matter. Oh, there's a big friggin' clear button up there. Okay, so that pulls in the translator text component, and I can translate. Let's jump out of translator mode, and now it doesn't pull it in. So, all right, so think about what we've done here. Obviously, we haven't done the entire tool chain, but you know that would be kind of a little bit of extra effort, which is something that I'll have to think about later on, how I can then create a tool chain where you can store this on the back end, and I would then create an interface so that you can use whatever backend you want. So if you're using Supabase, and then, see, this is one of the cool things about View Model. I can now say, oh, you're using Supabase. You can still use this library that I created for storing translations on the back end, so that you can then hire a translator that can get your whole website translated like way faster than if they have to do it the old-fashioned way. Like, I know there's a few other tools around there, but the way a lot of people do it is they just update a JSON object and it just doesn't scale. The tooling for it really sucks. One of the problems, the scale isn't the word I meant, by the way. One of the problems is that when you translate, you want to have context. And if you don't have context, then it's difficult to get the translation right. So right here, I can see they've just landed on this page, and that's when they're seeing this message here. But if I don't have that context, then that welcome screen could mean something totally different. So that, this might not be the best example, but that sort of reveals itself if a page isn't properly translated. And it's these little things that really ruin the experience for the user. Whereas now you'll be able to create translations really quickly, and people will be able to easily turn those translations into something useful. So the other thing is, so I'm just trying to think out loud here. We'll also need to have like a running list of IDs. So maybe you could do something like whenever you test the application, or maybe there's something that runs through the app, or if you're a translator, if you're in translation mode and you come across an ID that you'd never seen before that doesn't exist on the back end, that ID then gets stored on the back end so that you now know that there is a group of translators that need to translate this text. So you could create some sort of tooling that basically says, whenever we find a translation that doesn't exist on the back end, create it on the back end, and then send a notification out to all of our translators to translate these words. And it could even then store the URL as well that the user was on when they actually saw that word that needed to be translated. So there's some really cool stuff that you could do to make this better. But anyway, this is a start, because you definitely want tooling in the future that maintains your translation going forward. Okay, so there we go. I reckon this is a really cool idea. I'm definitely going to turn this into something and add it to Augment Quasar. Yeah, by the way, for those of you that wanted a bit of a peek at Augment Quasar, I'm going to open that up. I think I'm done with this for now. This was a lot of fun. We just close out that project, and I'll show you guys what I've been working on, because it is super, super cool. Maybe jump out of full screen. No, we'll leave it in full screen, and we'll just switch to the docs. So Augment Quasar is basically a whole bunch of components that augment Quasar. It's very, very opinionated stuff on top of Quasar. And I'll give you an example of one of those things in a moment. If I say here p-docs-dev, and the docs aren't currently live because I'm having troubles building it. It's kind of hard to get. I'm trying to incorporate the VPress docs with, oh yeah, and I've got some color screw ups here with Quasar. So here's one that I built recently that I think is really, really nice. I always have a hero login page in my applications. It's just something that you tend to need. A place that you can log in, or if you want, you can register as well. And on the left side of the screen, I'll just show you what it looks like. So if I click on here, this is now a component, an entire component. It's actually a QPage component. So when you build a new app, you can easily just whack this QPage component on a route, and inside of it, just add things like your own login, depending on like how you log into the app. And you've got like before and after slots that you'll be able to add in here as well. And you'll be able to select an image that you want on the right side, and you'll be able to select a video. So if I click on play here, it actually goes to a video and fades out the background. So just all this shit that you usually need to build for a new application, is already done for you. And I think this is better than something like Tailwind. I love these tools. I think those tools are really cool. I'm not interested in using them personally, because I think the way that I develop in this way is it sacrifices kind of artistic design up front, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice because you can add that artistic stuff that you want later on. So I prefer to have something that's just a standardized styling system like Material Design, and then later on down the line, I can then add stuff like, I don't actually use Tailwind, I use something called Uno CSS, but you can use whatever utility library you like to then style on top of a basic design like Material Design. But anyway, so yeah, this is one of the things that's part of Augment Quasar, and then you'll be able to say like register here, or go back to the login page. It's really easy to add more fields if you need to add them in. You got the remember me button. Just all that basic shit is built for you so that, and when I say you, I'm actually building this for myself in the hopes that I can build a team of people that will then build stuff with me. So if you see this and you go, I don't like it, it's not really what I'm looking for, like that's totally fine. And I'm probably not going to build what you're looking for. It's more just like building out these patterns, these very opinionated patterns over and over again, and getting them solved up front so that we never have to build them again. Or at least my team never has to build them again. And then sharing them so that people that enjoy using these components and it does vibe with them, they can then either join my team or go off and build their own team and start, making money in the world because they can build apps so much faster. All right, so that's one thing. That's the hero page. But then everything, like the input as well, what we've done is we've made it so that you can set designs up front. So things like flat and bordered and, borderless, those little designs that you can't, and filled, those designs that you can't set as defaults in Quasar. We've actually created a system so that you can set defaults now. So when you first install this, you've got a plugin you can choose to use. You actually don't need to install the plugin. Everything will work without a plugin. But if you want, you'll be able to use the foundation plugin. Where's the plugin part of this? I can't remember where I put it now. Let's just search for the word plugin. Yeah, everything gets its own plugin. I think there's like a foundation plugin. Yeah, okay, I think this is one. So now you can say, when you're setting it up, by the way, I want everything to be square. I want everything to be flat. I want everything to be bordered. Or I haven't added unelevated in there, but, I'll add that in as well. Oh, here we go. That's actually a different category. So all of these different things, you'll be able to set them up front so that if you want a flat design, you can then set the button kind equal to unelevated, and then you can set flat equal to true, and then bordered equal to true. And if you do all of that, you are then set up to have a really nice flat design in your application. So this is kind of an answer to people wanting to have a design system where, you don't have to add the word flat every time. Look, to be honest, I don't think it's a big deal. I've been using the word filled in most of my input components because I prefer the filled design everywhere in my apps for years. And if you think that's what's slowing you down, then think again. There are so many things I would optimize before having to add the word filled every time I have a Q input component. It's just like so low on my priority list of things to optimize. But, it will be possible now with something like Augment Quasar. And yeah, just a few other things like date time. A lot of these I've built, I haven't even built out yet. I've just sort of created a placeholder for them. Making it really easy to just add a date and a time in an input. You've probably built this component yourself a million times. So we can just get that done and dusted so we never have to worry again. You can just say a date time and you're ready to go with a date time component. Some of my favorites though are the CRUD table component. So where's the CRUD? Yeah, manage resources. Oh no, that's tabs. This is kind of cool as well though. So if you've got a resource, you can pass them all through like this, and then you get an edit button, a delete button, and a create button, and you can search everything that's inside of there. It's kind of like a really nice one to have like on the left side of a menu if you've got some resources and you want to create it. And then when you click on that resource, so maybe when I click on this, for example, it then shows another space on the right here. This is really super handy for those situations. Another one though that I'm really excited about is, where is it? Maybe it is just table. No. I thought it was CRUD table. Here we go, resource table. Just give that a second to reload because Veet's doing something. So this table actually uses a schema behind the scenes. So we have a schema that essentially matches up field types to this table. So we didn't have to say what all of these fields look like. There's already a date field type which matches this component for the table component. And then you can, you press the update button, the create button, and then make it so that they open dialogues, etc. But one of the other cool things is that schema also works for creating forms. So using one schema, and I wish I could show you what it looks like. Actually, maybe I can show you a schema form. Okay, I think I might have some docs for the a schema form. Yeah, it might be in here. Let's just give that a sec to load. Yeah, okay, here's an example of a schema where you can give it like a type, and by setting it to an array, it shows an array input component. Anyway, this is too hard to explain in one video, but basically it makes it really, really easy to automatically generate forms. I'm basically trying to get to a point where, like, I've heard every developer, I swear, every single developer I talk to always comes up with comments like, oh, you know, this should be easy and the forms should be able to generate themselves or whatever. But nobody is building it, or if they are building it, they're not building it in a way that's flexible. So I want to build this in a way so that you can always, 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 always tap into the component. There's always a way that you can say, for example, I just want to change this input component because I want to make it slightly different. So generate the form for me, but there's one or two things that I want to tweak for my use case. And the same with the table component. You shouldn't lose all of the slots when you create the table component. And this is like the Quasar philosophy. Quasar, and I always say this about Quasar, it's simple by default, but very easy to opt into complexity. And we should be building components like that as well. So this should do everything possible for you. It should put in, oh, there we go. We've even got like async stuff going on where you can click on that and that's pretty cool. I don't even know how I built that. But by default, it should create everything for you. It should handle all relationships for you. So when you have a drop down with a belongs to relationship, it should also have search in that as well. So there we go. That's got backend search working as well. And it's even got it so, you know, when you scroll down, it shows more stuff. That's really cool. Oh man, that's wicked. Like that should be done for you. And then if you decide, oh, hang on, this isn't working exactly how I want it to, it should be easy for you to then create a slot that basically just comes in where you can then just take total control of that one situation. At least that's my philosophy. And I think that's what people's philosophy should be if they want to build stuff that other people can build on top of easily. And yeah, so what are some other ones? Yeah, so schema create dialog. This is basically just that schema form I showed you, but it wraps it in a really nice create dialog. So like the code for this, let me just see if I can find the usage code for that. Look at this. This is ridiculous. That's our form. It's just a ref, so you can easily model the form itself, and then you can show the dialog, and when you're ready to actually create, you've got @create like that. And if you want to know if it's currently creating, you can just pass creating through like that. So it's just ridiculously simple. Now imagine this with view model. I've specifically built these so they match up really, really nicely with view model. So if we now import something like import use creator from @viewModel/core, this won't work because this doesn't have view model, but I'm just kind of like showing you as an example. Then the way you would do this would be like this: const creator, and you'd put in the name of the thing, so maybe like post creator is equal to use creator, and then you just pass through post. So you would have like your post model, which you would import as well. Then we can just say for creating post creator dot creating dot value. Like, fuck me, how simple is that? And to create it, post creator dot create. And then for the schema, you would then be able to just import the schema. I'll talk more on that later. There's a whole bunch of cool things I'm doing to make it so that you've got a single source of truth for what the structure of your data looks like. And the idea is we have one place where we define the structure of our data, and that might end up being super, super complicated. That might be what it looks like in the database as well, whether or not it's unique, the validation rules, and just the list goes on and on and on. You can have like a massive JSON object that describes everything about your data, and then you generate everything off of that JSON object. And by doing that, you then have one source of truth that everybody can decide on is the place for data. And I've realized over the years that source of truth cannot be your database. because your database doesn't hold all the information about your data. And it has to be your own JSON schema that you and your team decide on, because you might come up with other stuff that is information about your data that you need to know, that other people don't do. So for example, maybe you do this might be a silly example, but maybe you do a video on every single field for your database, for your data. So, maybe the user's name has got its own video, or its own, like maybe a link to its own documentation. You now have your own concept that needs to be put into this idea of a single source of data. So I want to create a tool that allows you to basically add your own required sort of fields that go into your data. And then you can then automatically generate, for example, documentation pages based on your data. So, I think that every company should have a single source of truth for their data, and then they generate things off of that. And that single source of truth should probably be JSON. And I've decided for me, it's going to be JSON schema, but like a loose version of JSON schema where you can generate all your models off of it and you can validate things, in the JSON schema way. But it, also just merges in a whole bunch of other shit about your data that JSON schema can then just ignore. Okay, so you'll be able to do it like this. And then for vModel, for the dialog, for showing the dialog, you can still have this show dialog. For the form, postcreator.form.value. It's that simple, and that's it. That's all we have to do now to have something. Oh, another one we'll have is validation errors. So you'll be able to say validation errors. And guess what? That's also on vModel. So we can say postcreator.validationerrors.value. Standard errors, I always break these up because validation errors work very differently to any other kind of error, like a 401 or a 403, or etc. So then you can say standard errors.value, and we'll have a component for that as well. Actually, maybe I've built it. No, I haven't. But all of these will get their own component. So if you wanted to do your own validation errors, like outside of this dialog, then you could go ahead and, hijack that and do it yourself. But like, imagine how simple this would be then. You want to have a create dialog that generates the form, you just do this. But then maybe you've got something that's a little bit more advanced. And so you can't use this a schema create dialog because you got, some slight differences in your form. Then what you might do is you might just use the a dialog or a create dialog, or maybe even just a dialog, which still gives you the title at the top, and it still gives you the close button there. So you still get a whole bunch of this stuff built for you. And then you can say a schema form, and then you can create the form. So essentially what I'm saying is you can rebuild what's happening here at one step lower. So then you can say, I'm going to go one step lower so I have more control over the innards of the dialog, because maybe for some reason the slotting I give you here isn't quite good enough for your use case. So you go, all right, I'm going to go one step further and take control of the dialog. Or maybe you want total control of the dialog, so you make this a queue dialog there, because maybe you don't want a menu, or you want to have like a queue bar for your menu. So then you go one step further down, but then the schema form is still handled by us. And then maybe you go, I don't know, you can take this into oblivion. The idea is you always make it easy to go one step down for the user. By the user, sorry, I mean the developer in this case. And by doing this, you create really, you make applications that are super easy to prototype really quickly without sacrificing flexibility. And that's been my goal over the past, probably been like past 6 or 7 years. Honestly, soon after I discovered Quasar, I've had this goal of trying to do this, and it's taken a long time to build the fundamentals. One of the things that had to be built was vModel, because we had to abstract out how we work with a backend. But now that we've abstracted out how we work with a backend, all of these components can be built assuming that the user is using vModel. And if you're not using vModel, you can still drop down a few levels lower. So for example, this a schema form is not coupled to vModel, but we'll eventually create a form that is coupled to vModel that uses a schema form under the hood. And by doing that, we can then say, okay, this is our vModel version of a form. And therefore, all you have to do is pass through the vModel composable. You don't even have to do any of this. You'll be able to say um, a view model create form. Maybe we'd call it something like that. And then we would say, maybe you call that composable, or I'd be more descriptive, like creator. And then in this case, you send through the post creator, and that's it. That now does everything you need to create a model, because the way the creator works is always the same. And that doesn't matter if you're using Supabase, Strapi, Laravel, any backend that supports view model. Again, this is why view model had to be created first. And it is still a work in progress, but like that's why I kind of just locked myself in a room for 3 months and just focused on getting that project done and doing it right and making sure it's covered with tests so that we can easily like iterate on it and all that jazz. Because now we can start building on top of that. If it's not done right, you build on top of that, you make mistakes, and then you have to go back to view model again. Whereas I've created these, these creator composables. I've literally done this about 15 times. So many over and over again, I've created these composables and learnt the mistakes. So I feel like I'm in a good position to be able to be the one that makes this basically abstraction. And we'll find out soon whether or not I was right about that and if those 3 months were a waste of time. But yeah, that's the goal, to essentially create all of these layers. And by the way, I think the way that most companies do this is wrong. And maybe it's because it's a money grab kind of thing. But if you look at Microsoft, I reckon, at least from my point of view and from people I've talked to, the problem is they went from the end of the spectrum of let's make it really... And look, okay, hang on, let me take a step back here. You got something like Squarespace, which is great, but it's not great for developers. It goes really hard on the end of the spectrum of easy to build. But if you were to go from Squarespace to developer, if you were to try and go from a Squarespace to a Vue app, it would be really difficult and it would be a shit experience for the Vue developer. Because going from something that's easy to click, drag, and build to something that works well with developers is really, really hard to do. In fact, I would say it's borderline impossible. And in my opinion, at some point you need to buy into certain technologies. And there's a bit of risk involved there. And maybe part of that risk is that you simply have to take on projects if they die. But if you go from that spectrum of everything is click draggable and then go to the side of making it nice for developers, you're fucked. And Microsoft kind of did a good job, I think, with Power Apps. Not a great job, but a better job where they were thinking about coders from the beginning. So they were a little bit closer to the spectrum of let's make it so that it's easy to drop down to a coder level. What I want to do, and what I think is the right way to do it, is to go to the complete other side of the spectrum and make your way up from there. So I want to create tooling that makes it really easy for developers to build stuff quickly, and then slowly build tools on top of that so that eventually we actually have our own click drag tools so that people can click drag, build applications. But that is on the back of lots and lots of time and lots of probably months or even years, because this project won't be built until years down the line, of making sure that we have a foundation that works well for developers. So now and that's why the modular Quasar template is so helpful here. So this structure of having, the fact that I have a structure for building my applications now means that later on down the line, we can create click drag tools that can then generate code that follows a structure that works for developers. Currently, click drag tools can generate code that is bullshit and it's not helpful. And I hate these tools and I hate working with them. And honestly, I refuse to work with them. You couldn't offer me enough money to work with these tools unless it was for like a year, and then I could use that money to leverage building more of this cool stuff. But anyway, like, kind of like, I think Figma does this where they can generate a HTML file or something, or there's some tools that try and do this in reverse, and they're just not what I'm looking for. But if you were to say, for example, we are using Quasar End of story. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. Maybe we'll support other frameworks down the future, but we're using Quasar. We use Pina ORM for our model system. We use JSON schema, and this is how we structure our JSON schema data. And you make these decisions. Then later on, you can create a click drag tool that you can use to click drag your, Quasar components, and you can edit those components to your heart's content so that they don't look like material design if you want. That's not hard to do. But then you can create a click drag tool that then generates a Quasar app that has got a modules directory, and all of the model data makes sense to developers as well. So you can actually genuinely bridge that gap between somebody who does click dragging for an interface. And sure, there might be some things that you need to tweak here and there, but for the most part, a developer can then just take that project and they might actually open the click drag tool, maybe add some renaming for things so that it's a little bit more friendly to what they're doing, press the generate button, and now they've got an app that they can tap into at any level. They can tap into at any level easily, and they can always drop down to a JavaScript level easily. So at the very top, you've got something that's built with Augment Quasar, where it's really easy to mess with those components. At the very top of that is View Model components with Augment Quasar. Underneath that, you've got components that View Model extends on top of. Underneath that, you've got Quasar itself, so you can drop down to that level. Underneath that, you've got Views, so you can drop down to Views level in case there's some stuff that you want to create that Quasar doesn't offer. So like some components that are super, specific to your use case. And then underneath Vue, you can then drop down to a JavaScript level, of course, because Vue is just a JavaScript framework. So every step of the way, we can tap into it. And by the way, all of this works on any on any platform. So it'll work on Electron, it'll work on as a mobile app, it'll work as a PWA, which is, I'm very excited about PWAs because I think they're the future of mobile applications. So yeah, anyway, little rant, little spiel. I just wanted to give you guys a bit more of the vision of what I'm working on. And yeah, if you're excited about this kind of stuff, then keep following along. It's happening. I mean, it's been so many years in the making, but a lot of this stuff is really starting to come together. The combination of using interfaces and figuring out how to create good interfaces and building a foundation for Augment Quasar, which I still need to make a few tweaks before I can get the docs online, but those two things combined, and another project I'll talk about later on called, what am I calling it? Fuck, I can't remember. LSD project. An LSD project is basically that JSON schema thing I was talking about, an interface that even somebody that doesn't know about coding can use to essentially structure out an application. So if you got someone who understands SQL, so like people who know how to structure data, but they're not like traditional coders, that person can then create an idea for an application and structure out the entire thing. And then we can generate all of our modules based on that and then just start developing really, really quickly. So that's another project that I'm working on. So basically the design system is going to be LSD project, where you create your project. And you can almost think of this as, you know how you got those schema tools for databases? I can't remember what they're called, but you can create those diagrams for databases. Kind of like that, but for creating a JSON schema for your application that becomes your single source of truth. So you'll be able to, first of all, build your data structure. Then you'll be able to prototype your application by generating your app based on that data structure. And using View Model, you'll be able to use the user's computer to store everything. So IndexedDB rather than an actual database, where you can then start prototyping it. And then you go to the client and you go, okay, here's what I've built. And they go, change this and that. And so you go back to LSD project, make the changes, regenerate everything. And then you can start iterating again. So making database changes are just really, really fucking simple. You go to the client and they go, change this. You go back to LSD project. You make the tweaks to the database that you need to make. You make the tweaks to the application. You go to the client and they go, yes, this is the exact app that I want. Oh my God, this is amazing. By the way, all this time, the client is able to actually use this project on their computer because they can click around on the project, create models, update, delete things. That all works because it just uses their computer as a database. It's really fucking cool. I've just been swearing so much. I've just decided I'm going to start swearing in this channel now. So let me know if you don't like that, and then maybe I'll change my mind. I probably won't. But then when the client goes, oh my God, this is exactly what I want. Thank you. Since View Model uses the same interface, you then build out your backend, and then you swap out the IndexedDB version with your Laravel version, or your Strapi version, or your Supabase version, or your Microsoft Dataverse version, whatever that ends up being. So you don't even build the backend, you don't build the database until you've built something that the clients want. And then when the client goes, yes, this looks good and this is what I want, then you build out the backend, and you don't have to rewrite any of the code. You can just stitch it directly up to the backend because View Model has already created that interface there between, it's kind of like GraphQL, but better because it's easier, it's more tightly integrated with Vue, and you don't have to create those complex queries. They're not that complex, but look, I just find GraphQL, it's weird because I love the idea of GraphQL. In my head, it is this amazing thing. And in the real world, it just isn't. It just isn't. Like, it's just frustrating to use. It's actually kind of hard to keep your data in sync on the front end. View Model single-handedly solves that problem, by the way, because it is concerned with your front-end store that's built in, baked into View Model. If you're using View Model, you're using Pina ORM, and you're using an entire ORM on your front end so that none of your data falls out of sync with your back end. It's bloody beautiful. But yeah, so anyway, I should probably finish up here. I've been just like munging on for about an hour and a half now, but I hope you enjoyed this stream. Can View Model connect to a REST API? Yes. So the way View Model works is it's basically got a, in fact, actually, Darth Dread, what API are you using at the moment? What REST API are you using? Because the ones that I currently have my eyes on are Strapi. And the reason Strapi is one of the chosen ones is because it has to be, for me to go all in on building out an implementation, it has to be an advanced REST API. If it's not advanced, it can still work with View Model, but essentially we just have to turn off a lot of the features. So if you can't do nested filtering with your API, then we can't build that feature. We basically just have to turn it off. .NET and Node.js. So, okay, for those backends, it's a bit of a maybe. Maybe you know this. Does .NET have any sort of a, any tooling for generating a REST API for you? Because for it to work with View Model, it has to be a predictable backend API. So Strapi's backend API, well, Strapi is Node.js, so there you go. You could use Strapi if you wanted to. So Strapi, the only reason, one of the only reasons I chose Strapi is because of that predictable advanced REST API. Another one is Laravel Orion. So if you're a Laravel developer, Orion has got an advanced REST API that it can generate for you. So it's got scoping, so it's got filters, which is built into View Model. We've got sorting with View Model. We don't have aggregates yet. We might add them. Including related data is built into View Model. That is all available with Strapi, and it's available with Orion. If you're using Java on the back end, there's something called Elide. And Elide has got, cool, I get it. Thanks, Luke. Love your work. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, so Elide is kind of like a Java version of these things that I'm talking about. It's got an advanced API that it builds for you. Another one is Microsoft Dataverse. So Dataverse is really exciting because View Model with Dataverse is essentially going to allow you to get into the Microsoft ecosystem with your apps very, very easily. So if you want to build an app for a client that's going to pay a lot of money, then Dataverse should be very interesting to you because now you can use Power BI. They can make their own Power Apps on top of what you've built. They can, basically all of this really cool shit that Microsoft has available for you inside of their ecosystem is now 100% transparently open in what you're doing with View Model because all of your data ends up saved on a Dataverse database. And this is really exciting because Dataverse is an advanced enough it opens up an advanced enough API that I'm pretty confident I'll be able to hook it up to ViewModel. Well, honestly, any REST API you can hook up to ViewModel, but the ones you want to hook up are the ones, like I said, that have got advanced filtering and includes and, stuff like that. Because if it doesn't do that, then I'm probably not going to put the effort into maintaining it long term, because it's basically, I would just say to you, maybe choose another backend at that point. If you're using ViewModel. So the other one is Supabase. So Supabase is basically just like SQL, which is a really cool thing about it. You'll be able to very easily create a Supabase backend and then just, hook up to all of that. So if I get ViewModel with working all of these, then if you want to prototype things really quickly, you can use something like Strapi or Supabase, because it's so ridiculously easy to build a backend with these tools. If you're a Java person, you've got Elide. If you're a Microsoft person, you've got Microsoft Dataverse. If you're a Laravel person, you've got Laravel. And this means there's so many benefits to all this. So the other thing is, I'll now be able to do videos that use ViewModel. And if you're part of any of these ecosystems here, you can benefit from those videos, because we'll just use, by the way, another one I can't open for a tab here because there's no website for it. Well, I guess there is. It's ViewModel. The other one is local storage, right? So we got, and since not local storage, sorry, it's actually IndexedDB. IndexedDB is basically the data is the user's computer. And since we can use the user's computer as an advanced database for ViewModel, that's the thing that allows us to prototype really quickly. So, now that means I can do a video series where we use IndexedDB. And then when we're done, I can basically just say to you, I can just send people to another video that says, hey, now you can swap out your backend for Strapi. And you can start using the thing that we built in this video with a Strapi backend, or Laravel, or Java, or Microsoft, or Supabase. So with that project that everybody can sort of get in on, I can then have another video for each of these backends and all I have to show you in those videos is how to set it up. Because once you've got it set up, everything else we do, literally everything else we do, is the exact same, because ViewModel has the same API. And if you want to look at ViewModel's API, then check out the docs here. I'll just paste that into the comments. And I'll quickly just put that into the description section here for YouTube. Yeah, so if you want to have a look at this, check out ViewModel. And just to give you an idea, the updater has got some really cool things that I'm super excited about. So it will automatically generate the form for you. Let me just go through some of these things because it's so bloody exciting, and I'm just bursting with excitement to share it with you all. With Use Updater, one of the problems is pre-populating the form. And one of those problems is sometimes you already have the form on the front end, and sometimes you don't have the form on the front end. And if you have the form's data on the front end, you want to use that data to pre-populate the form. You don't want to have to make a request. So what ViewModel does is it says, I'm going to check if the thing you're trying to update exists in the store. All right, so let's just say we're trying to update a post with an ID of 1. It searches the store for a post with an ID of 1, and if it finds it, it uses that to populate the form. In other words, the form populates instantly. But if it doesn't find it, it goes, well, shit, I can't actually find this record in the store. I'm going to hit the back end now and try and find that on the back end. So then what it does is it hits the back end and then uses the back end and then inserts it into the store and then pre-populates the form. Therefore, you can pre-populate the form and ViewModel will automatically populate it in the smartest way possible. All right, that's the first thing. Another cool thing is we've got auto updating. So we can come in here and just type something in there, and with a debouncer that you can set, it's automatically going to update that data on the back end. So stuff like Trello, where you can drag and drop cards and you can just type things in, they automatically update. All of that has been thought out for you. And the code for this, first time this loads, it's a little bit slow. The code for this is ridiculously simple. So you can say immediately make form. So as soon as you get that ID, I want you to make the form for me. And then auto update is equal to true. And we can also have an auto update debouncer, which we've got set to 250 milliseconds here. And you can easily change this. And that's it. Now, whenever we change post updated.form, right, because it's being modeled here, as that changes, this automatically updates. That's all we had to do to create an automatic updating form. I honestly can't even think of cleaner code for doing something like this. It's a ridiculous amount of functionality for virtually no work. Optimistic. So optimistic, for those of you that don't know, means that essentially we assume that the update was successful. And if the update wasn't successful, it then reverts the data. So that really snappy UI you get with something like Trello, you get that because of the concept of optimistic. In other words, when I drag and drop something, before it's updated on the back end, it assumes that the backend request is going to be successful. So you drag it, you drop it, and then it just straight away snaps there as if the update happened instantly. But of course it didn't. Trello in the background is still making that request and updating the movement of that card. Or if you type into that card some text and then you click out of it, it doesn't even tell you that it's updating. And from memory, it just makes you feel like it's updating automatically. And that's what optimistic is. And so the way ViewModel does this by default is we actually revert the record, because to do something like Trello, you would actually have to have something a little bit more advanced where you've got some sort of a syncing system. But what we do to essentially give you the same functionality is we make it so that you can type something in there, press update, and straight away it just assumes that it's successful and it gets inserted into the store. So your store is now updated with that record. Then if the update actually fails, if you get an error response back, it reverts those changes. So it does the update in the store, sends the request. If there's an error, it then reverts that record back to what it originally was, just to make sure that the user doesn't have what I call a dishonest UI. So you want your UI to be as honest as possible. If you're using optimistic, you're actually making your UI a little bit dishonest. But the benefit you get from that is a snappier UI that is much more enjoyable to use for users. So the other thing is validation. We have a validation object. So we split our errors into two different things, standard errors and validation errors. The reason we do that is because essentially we're forcing the API to give us the errors in a certain format. So if you get an error from Strapi or Laravel or whatever backend, usually they will go through all of the records and tell you what went wrong with them. And what we do is we essentially get the implementer of that interface, so whoever's creating an implementation for ViewModel, which is usually going to be me, to always structure the validation errors the same way. And that means that you can create error messages really, really easily. And it also means that you can create components. So you can have like a validation error component that will work with any backend. So now, using Augment Quasar, I can create a ViewModel validation error component. And it doesn't matter what backend you're using. Again, I just can't get over how cool this is. If you're using Strapi, Laravel, Elide, Microsoft Supabase, if you get an error on the backend, we will be able to handle those validation errors, and you will never, again, have to write the code for that. Where, you know that code where you end up with these really long lines, and even this is long. I think I did a pretty good job simplifying this UI, but we got this post updater, validation errors.value.title. So it's basically, and that's why you get the question mark there. It's saying, hey, on validation errors, on that object, is title there? If it is, then I want you to join all of those validation errors with a full stop. All right, and it's as simple as that. But of course, these end up in their own components, so you don't end up even having to write this code. All right, scrolling down a little bit further, that's updating. Really excited, especially about auto updates and making forms. The making form thing I think is especially cool, where you can just change the ID and it automatically just remakes the form for you. So I think I can even go like, try a couple of these here. Oh, I need to reset the data. That's all right, I'll do that later. So the other one that's really exciting is use indexer. And this is just crazy, right? This is the guts of view model. So we've got filters available to us, and the ones we have at the moment are all the ones that are available that I've got listed here. And I've got a little warning here, which kind of hits on what I was talking about before with you, Darth Dread, which is basically the driver you're using might not support all the above filters. So some drivers are just not going to be able to support everything that ViewModel has. That's just a reality. Like the reality is we might have a certain way of filtering data that isn't supported in ViewModel, in which case we would throw an error. So as much as possible, we want things to be swappable, which is why I'm only going to opt into backends that support the entirety of the API, or at least most of the ViewModel API. But for those that don't support a lot of the ViewModel API, I'm probably just not going to support them, or somebody else can implement their own implementation, and then they'll at least get some benefit from ViewModel. All right, so and there's another thing that I want to add in the future, which is basically a JSON object that says what features are and aren't enabled. And by doing that, we can then have a really nice table in ViewModel that has a list of implementations and what they do and don't support. Yeah, so especially something like aggregation, there are a lot of UIs, APIs that just don't support it. So I'm thinking of maybe supporting it, and then the ones that don't support it, you just turn it off and throw an error. You say, for example, hey, it'll be the responsibility of the implementer, or maybe not the implementer. That JSON object can then have, for example, aggregation enabled equals true, or aggregation enabled equals false. And if it's equal to false and they try to do an aggregation in their filter, we'll basically catch that and say, hey, you tried to do an aggregation. That's actually not supported in, Microsoft Dataverse or whatever doesn't support it. But yeah, you can do basic filters. All right, so we got stuff like this. We can say the name equals whatever. And this might not look like the sexiest code to you, but when you start modeling this on the front end, you'll probably realize how sexy this code is, being able to do filters this way. So filters could actually be a ref. We could have had filters up here as a const filters equals ref, and then you can type that as filters. You can actually easily type this stuff as well. And then if you had like a const filters here, you can easily model that in your application. And the reason is you can then just say filters.name.equals and easily model that. Whereas if this was an array, this wouldn't be easy to model. A lot of people do that in their APIs. Actually, Laravel Orion did that. See how it's got filters as an array of objects? This is cool, and it's good because it means it can be ordered. But it's much, much, much easier to model things when you do it using an object syntax like this. So this is why we use an object syntax. Absolute joy to model on the front end. And this is my favorite API for doing filters. And then you can easily do nested filters as well. So, and we've got and/or operators. So you can do, let me just open this up because it looks a bit nicer with this highlighting. So you can say, for example, get me a post where the body contains that, or created at is greater than that, or user ID is equal to that. Sorry, so this would, you can imagine a cheeky and operator between these two, and the or, you can think of that as an or block. So it would be that or that. So it might take a second for people to wrap their head around that, but basically that means this is an or block. Yeah, so that's how that works. Really easy to do and or operations. And hopefully you're starting to see what I mean by needing a complex API. If you have an API that doesn't support that, then we just can't support that functionality. And later on, when I create filter components for this, like the view model, I'll be able to create a view model filter component that supports basically everything inside of this API for filtering and ordering and that kind of stuff. So with one component, we will then be able to filter with any backend. So imagine how cool that would be. You can have a table with filters, And if you're using view model, that table where you can create and update your models and delete models and then also filtered records and all that jazz, that'll all be built for you for free. You will almost literally write no code. You just have to send down the composable, the post indexer composable, and it will automatically update the filters object for you inside of that component. It's going to be so freaking wicked. So nested data, of course, you need to be able to include data and filter based on nested data. So now you can say filters. So you can say, give me the user that's got posts that were created at after 2023 11/11, right? So even more advanced filters like that is going to work. And you could add an OR operator in here if you wanted. In fact, is the REPL thing working? I think it might be working. Oh, no, I think I wrote something recently that broke it. Oh, we'll give it a second and find out. I can still type into it. So then you could come in here and say, you got created out there, but then you could have an OR block, right? And inside of your OR block, you could have even more stuff going on here. So, you can nested OR inside of your filters. So a user that's got posts were created at is that, and anything inside of this OR block, turns out to be true. Really, really freaking cool. So you got nested filters as well. Another thing we've got, of course, is stuff like order by pagination is really, really cool with this. Let me just check if this is working. Yeah, so it's really easy to create your own pagination components. And this is just going to work with Quasar. So Quasar's got everything you need built into the QTable component for pagination. We'll now be able to basically create a view model version of that table that's got full pagination built in. And this is absolutely insane. I don't know why that's not working. There's probably a little bug there. You got paginate immediate, and all that means is it's got this little thing on top that makes it a little bit easier. So when records per page changes, so when you change that to an 8, for example, it just automatically repaginates for you. So that's pretty cool. I think I've messed something up with these examples. Yeah, some of those aren't showing. There's an error in my docs. Oh, it doesn't really matter. Let's just refresh the page, see if that fixes it. Doesn't matter, is what it is. So another thing we've got is, of course, including data. So we got width, and I recommend doing width this way. And the reason I recommend doing it with this syntax, which might look a little bit ugly, is that you can expand it in the future. So you can say, give me my posts, and it's typed as well. So you get full typing if you do it as an object, whereas that full typing wasn't possible when you do it as a string. So if I say posts with users, there's no way for me to type that, or at least no sane way for me to type that without doing some weird generator shit. And then of course you can say width and then give that an array. And then you can do dot syntax. So you can say user dot profile or something like that. But yeah, with this object syntax, and let's just see if the REPL's going to work here, because I'd love to be able to show you what this looks like. If I do control space there, yeah, there we go. So if I control space here, you can see that I get auto completion for comments. And if I open that as an object, and then I control space that, and you could probably just do this in one line like this. We can now say, look at all the fields we can filter by, or do post. And so I can say, give me my post with my comments with my post, which makes no sense. But control space that, and then you could get the user with that. And then control space that, and look at that, I've got albums as well. And this is all going to work. Because of the way it's typed, I know that this is going to work properly. I don't have to do all this weird trial and error bullshit, because it's all beautifully typed for me. And if you build things with view model correctly from the beginning, then all this shit just falls into place, and I can now run that search. And I think, yeah, there's something wrong with my REPL. Bugger. All right, I'll get that fixed. This is a work in progress. Now, another thing that I'm really excited about, which I almost didn't add, but I ended up adding this in the end, is scoping. So you can add global scopes, especially useful for multi-tenanted apps. Now, usually when you have a multi-tenanted app, your multi-tenanting is going to be handled on the back end. Okay, so you wouldn't use, honestly, you'd probably never use scopes in the average app that you're building. except for when you're prototyping. So if you're prototyping an app and you want to know who's logged in and filter your data based on who's logged in, what you might do is you might just put a user ID on every field when you're first building your application. So every field gets a user ID, and then maybe you want to do tenanting and organization stuff as well. So with ViewModel, you can very easily build an application with multi-tenancy that you can then show clients. So you could add, for example, some scopes that are filters for every single record. So you could just filter every record by tenant ID, and then every single record that you have, just add a tenant ID in there, and then by default, they all get that scope. And bam, you've got a multi-tenanted app that you can work with that uses IndexedDB. And by the way, I keep saying IndexedDB. When I say that, I mean, if we go to application here, IndexedDB, it basically is just storing it inside of IndexedDB. It's kind of like local storage, but it means that I can async await it, because you can't async await local storage. So I just use a key value IndexedDB sort of plugin thing. Yeah, so essentially we're able to use this entire app with IndexedDB as if it were a real backend. So the entirety of the ViewModel API is actually built to work with a fake backend, quote unquote fake, because really it's real and it's on the user's computer. So now, and the docs are actually an example of this. If you go to this documentation website, what I'm doing behind the scenes is I'm installing this database on your computer. So now you can create, update, and delete stuff using any of the examples here, and they will actually create, update, and delete on your computer. So when you refresh the page, they still stick. And the idea of this button here, which isn't working properly right now, so I need to fix that, is that it resets your database. So you can give users a database with sample data, and then when they're done, you know, if they've screwed around with it too much, they'll be able to press a button that just resets the database, the whole page refreshes, and boom, they're right back to square one again. And it's really fast. And then if you make changes and then you add new sample data, you can basically just say to them, hey, refresh your page, and then press the reset database button. And then they do that, and then they've got the latest version of the app with the latest sample data. Like, imagine how fucking cool that would be. And now, one of the reasons I've added scopes is these scopes can actually be objects. Not objects, sorry, I meant functions. So let me just try and find a good example here. I might open this in the REPL. It's not very zoomed in. Can I zoom that in? Oh yeah, it's actually kind of working. So what we can do here is we can add a scope and say where the tenant ID equals, and then maybe get the tenant ID from local storage. So you could come in here and say like const tenant ID or IndexedDB, whatever you decide to do there, is equal to local storage dot get, and you can store that as tenant ID if you wanted to. And then we can come in here and say tenant ID equals that. And now you can add a global scope to the tenant ID. And you could do the same for the user ID. So now, when you're building a demo app for your clients, what they can do is, oh, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, so you're building, let's just imagine you're building this app that you can just show to your client. It doesn't use a real backend. You want to demo things back and forth and iterate with a fake database until they know what they want, until you've actually got the app that they want, then build the backend. In the meantime, you can just use this user ID here and make it so that when they log in, it just uses the fake user ID that was generated for them when they log in. So now you can, since this is a global scope, when they log in, you just set that user ID using local storage. So that might look something like this. User ID, something like that. And then when they log in, you just change what it is in local storage, and then this page gets hit. So maybe this is like the layout for the actual app page. And now that user ID ends up getting applied to the scope. So all of the data that they get is basically scoped to that user. And this is really cool because you can even mimic a login system now. And I'm actually going to build, a lot of you might know about another project I built called ViewAuth, which is basically an authentication interface that works with, I think I've got like Firebase, Supabase, Strapi, and Laravel right now working with it. So now I'll be able to add an implementation for ViewAuth called IndexedDB. And now the user will be able to log in and create accounts. And you can literally just store their username and password on their computer with IndexedDB and just ask them to use fake passwords because, you know, this is all just fake data. It doesn't matter if a fake password's stored on their computer. And then using IndexedDB, it can basically mimic a back-end authentication system. So now you can prototype an app with authentication, with multi-tenancy, or any other scoping. You could also like add multi-organizational data as well. And you can build all of this for a client in a prototype type situation. When you deploy it to the web, they can then go to something like Netlify and just watch it. So they just, use it. So they just jump on Netlify, use the application, click around with it, play with it, and they say, this didn't work, I don't like that, I wish you could change that. And you can do a video call with them and they can, and I talked about this before, where when your client sees something real, they start realizing what they actually want. Your client doesn't usually actually know what they want, especially if you're working with, ideally you want that app to not just go to the CEO or the manager or whatever. Ideally, you want that app to go into the hands of the person that's actually going to use that app. So you can say to this person that you're working with, can you send this, can we do a meeting with the person that's actually going to use it? So then you can get on a three-way meeting with them, and that person who's actually using it is going to give you the money ideas, the big money ideas. They're the ones that know how to build an app that's going to save that company lots of money and is going to be something worthwhile for you to build. So now you build out a prototype, you get on this call, you talk to that person, you guys all iterate together, you go off and you make the tweaks and changes, and you can do it ridiculously fast because of the tooling we've built. You go back to that person again, and you get on a call again with somebody who's actually going to use it. Ideally, you can actually sit next to that person in the real world. And this is all super, super possible because the update cycle is just really fucking fast. You literally just push your code. You want to change something in the database, then all you have to do is change it in the model, like in your Pina ORM class. And then it's just changed. You don't have to change anything on a back end. You don't have to worry about any constraints in the database or blah, 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 blah. You just get it built so it works beautiful in the front end. And then that person can then use that thing that you built and see if it's actually what they want. All right. I've been at this for over 2 hours now. I hope you all enjoyed this stream. I'm super excited for the future. I'm going to continue to work on some of this stuff today and keep you all updated with what I've been working on. And the more I iterate on this stuff, the more I'm going to be able to start building videos that show you all how to use it. Not live stream. I mean like proper tutorial videos where you can all easily follow along. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I really love doing these streams, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed streaming it for you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.